You want to safely buy an airplane? Find out how in the hangar. We're hosting a special episode of In the Hangar, but we're not even in the hangar. We're at AirVenture in Oshkosh, Wisconsin this week. I'm catching up with Schmindy with a bunch of eyes. Almost
Three.
everyone knows her from Instagram. I think you were one of the first accounts I actually ever followed.
Really?
Yeah, at the very beginning, I remember as soon as I had an Instagram account, yours was one of the first that popped up, and I've followed along all the way, and you do so many different things, but in that, you've now transitioned into aircraft sales and brokerage, and that's what I want to learn about today, because when I bought my plane, I had not the slightest clue. I wish I would have known you better because I would have reached out.
I wish you did. Yeah, I have been posting on social media for over 10 years now. When I started to learn how to fly, I didn't know anyone in aviation. My family wasn't in it. My friends were not in it. And so I started posting it to try to connect with other pilots and women pilots. And so that's really grown. And I've been flying airplanes for about 10 years and selling them for about 8 years.
And all kinds of airplanes. And
Yes.
now some type ratings. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so I fly everything from small tailwheel 2-seater airplanes the whole way up through the Citation business jets, the 525 line.
Wow, and a CFI. So we were talking this morning about the process of buying an airplane and flying in a plane that you don't know with a pilot you don't know, and how intimidating that process can be, and with all the other unknown factors that go along with buying an aircraft. When someone comes to you, I'm sure that they've probably seen a lot of your social media already, and it gives them a peace of mind that they're already comfortable with you as a pilot. They see what you fly and that you fly all the time and all of these different things. Do you get a lot of your leads through your social media content?
Yeah, I get a significant amount of clients through social media, and you just said it perfectly. A lot of people feel like they know me, which as a salesperson is really great, because the beginning of a relationship with a client is earning their trust and getting to know each other, and we get to fast forward through that because they know me from online, sometimes for several years, and maybe we've even chatted in the past online. So now when they want to buy an airplane, we get to skip that whole trust building part and go straight to business, which I really love.
Absolutely. And so who are you selling aircraft for at the moment?
I work for Lone Mountain Aircraft. They are a used brokerage. We primarily do high performance, high-end pistons the whole way through light to medium-sized business jets. We are a partner to Cirrus the factory, so a lot of the volume that we do is Cirrus, the SR series, and the Vision Jet. But we do a little bit of everything, and with my background selling aircraft protection on aviation, that's still what I love to specialize in. And of course I own a Cessna, so I
Which is on display right now at Garmin.
Yes.
The prettiest Cessna 182 I think that there
Thank
is
you.
out there anywhere. Sorry to anyone who has a 182, but the polishing though, how is that?
It's a labor of love. It's a work in process. If you are a perfectionist, do not ever buy a polished airplane, because there's always something to fix. There's always a smudge. There's always a scratch. But overall, like once you polish the whole airplane, it's so rewarding, and you need to have a lot of time. We don't have kids or pets, and so we just spend all of our time on the airplane.
Yeah, we were talking this morning to Drew and Lainey from Fly Me to the Fun, and they said the one polish that you do that's the shiniest ever, you'll never be satisfied again after that.
Yes, I wish there was a better way to preserve it, and I think we're going to start experimenting with some coatings in the future and try some panels. That would be a huge step for polished airplane owners, if there was a way to keep it shiny and not have to do it all the time.
Oh, yeah. Well, I just repainted the Cessna 150, and
Looks amazing.
I know the hardest part of the whole process was picking the color. That took the longest. It took me 2 months.
How
to
did
pick
you
the
decide
color.
on the color?
I laid them all out, and my eyes just kept going to the blue and the gold.
Yeah.
And the blue and the gold were original on the Cessna 150. It was not a great paint scheme. It was already metallic gold and blue, so we just mixed it up and went with a little bit of a different hue and went with it that way. But speaking of the 150, I got the plane in 2019, and I wish I would have known you then, because I didn't know the first thing about buying an aircraft. I I went down with a blank check from my uncle for the down payment because on my way out the door, he said, you're going to need a down payment. I hadn't thought about any of
You're
that.
like, money's involved? What?
Down payment and then also a contract. So I was very worried about the plane going down, spending all the time, money, hotels, doing a pre-buy, and then the plane getting sold out from under me in the process. So I was willing to do a down payment. The guy ended up only wanting a $100 down payment.
And I say that was worth the risk.
It was worth the risk. I printed off a generic contract that I just found online, and we both signed it at a picnic table, and I didn't know if I was protected or not. What is if you could think of the best possible plane buying process, what does that look like for an owner?
So once you identify the plane, which that's a whole nother conversation, right, on mission and budget and maybe even what part of the country that you're willing to buy it from, all those things. So once you find the airplane, there's a couple of ways to make sure that your transaction goes smoothly and safely. And I'd say the first thing of the three things I would suggest is try to work with an aircraft broker. And I know that's a broker telling you that, but we do this every day, and we see deals fall through all the time. We see them be successful, so we know what the right sauce is and can identify the red flags in a situation probably a lot earlier than someone else can. So we're there to protect you. But there's a lot of great opportunities just how you bought your airplane. That's not through a broker. So it doesn't mean that you shouldn't buy it. You can still get represented by a broker as a buyer. You could hire a buyer's agent. But still, if we still want to do it on your own, you can.
Yeah.
So a huge thing, and that you can talk about too, is the pre-buy.
The pre-buy is you have to know if you're going to get that limit or not.
Yeah.
And so who do you all use for pre-buys?
So we are brokering aircraft all over the country, and it's so important to get a pre-buy. A lot of people want to skip that because they want to save money.
Money well spent.
But let's be honest, if we're buying airplanes, like that's going to be the least expensive thing about your whole airplane ownership process is buying a pre-buy. And that's going to give you an opportunity to save money down the road. It's you not wasting money to purchase a pre-buy and then walk away from the deal, because you're probably walking away because of some high ticket item that's going to cost you $50,000 down the road.
Or it could help you negotiate the price.
Right.
And end up saving you thousands that way too.
Right. So back to your question, who do we use? Since our aircraft are all over the country, it's always someone different. But where I always start with research on pre-buys is looking for the OEM shops.
Yeah.
So if it's a Cirrus plane, I'm going to be looking at Cirrus authorized service shops. So you go on the Cirrus website, look on the map, and then you can see all their shops. Same thing for Cessnas and Beechcrafts. That's a great place to start. And then, of course, look in the location, the neighboring airports.
You don't want to go to the mechanic that they've been using.
Yes, great point. We don't suggest using the mechanic that's been maintaining the plane. Not that they would be out to get you, but they might be simply missing something. It's just great to have another set of eyes on the airplane. So we look in the local region, and it's standard for buyers to pay for the airplane to go to pre-buy. So whatever those repositioning costs are is on you as the buyer. So we're not going to find a pre-buy shop that's 3 hours away. We want to make sure it's pretty local. And then I interview shops. I ask them, what's your scope? Like, do you have a checklist that you use? What's your price? What do you do in these different situations? And then I present that to my buyer and give them some options, and then it's their choice on who they want to use, of course.
And are you digging through the logbooks, or are you leaving that up to the AMP who's doing the pre-buy for you guys? Because you know as well as I do, when it comes to the paperwork of an aircraft, sometimes you have an airworthy aircraft, but the paperwork's not in order, so it's not airworthy legally.
Correct.
Or you might have a plane that is not airworthy, but on paper it's airworthy. Either way.
So the first step when we identify the plane they want, before we even interview pre-buy shops, is I'm going to look through the logbooks, and so is my client. And of course, I'm not a mechanic. Typically, my client is not either. But as a pilot or as someone who's been reading logbooks for a long time, you can usually identify the red flags. And I'm going to go through and see, has it been annualed every year? Or is there big lapses? Has it sat for a long time? I want to look at the time at each annual. So is it 100 hours this year and it's still at 100 hours next year? That means they flew at 0 hours. Like, that's a red flag for me that the airplane has been sitting.
Yeah.
And I want to see when the last IFR certification was. And I want to make sure that everything's in order, best of my knowledge, before we even start spending money on a pre-buy. So that's important to me.
So I recently was reading this publication on pre-buys, and they said, and I'll get your opinion on it, be leery of a plane being sold with a fresh annual, because it's probably going to be the cheapest annual that plane could have ever gotten. And while it may seem like a perk for the buyer, the seller may have just annualed it. It might have been out of annual. That is fair. But if it wasn't out of annual and they're just selling it with a fresh annual, thinking that it's going to help it sell quicker or easier, they probably went with the cheapest, most deferred items. Oh, it's not pass tolerance. Oh, it's not required. Let's skip it. And you might be running into a little bit of a red flag with that.
Maybe.
What do you think about that?
I don't know that I would completely agree with it, actually. So we advertise fresh annuals all the time.
Oh, you do? Okay.
And usually it's not because the seller decided to get a 6-month early annual. It's just because they're selling the airplane, the annual's due in maybe 3 or 4 weeks, and they're going to do it now just to get ahead of it.
Yeah.
Or it was just simply due, and maybe if we say fresh annual, that means maybe the annual is done within the last 2 or 3 months.
Okay.
But that is a perk for buyers, in my opinion. And I mean, mechanics, like, you're signing your name on it, so you have to say it's airworthy.
Yeah.
We have to trust the mechanics to a certain point, that they're not skipping things just because they like the seller.
Yeah.
And they want to make money too, so they want people to buy the service.
I was asked to do a pre-buy one time, and the guy selling the plane was like, well, and he was my friend, the person selling, which I didn't like that situation.
Yeah.
I should be representing the buyer, not the seller, but they didn't know anyone else in the area. They asked me to do it, and the guy said, oh, please go easy on me. I'm getting ready to get engaged, and all of the money from this is going to go. And I was like, nope, this is getting muddy.
Yeah.
I have no interest to do that.
And that's why you want a clean third party for pre-buy.
Absolutely.
For sure. But no, I think that a fresh annual could be a huge perk.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't shy away from that.
As long as they did do all of those maintenance items. And
and you're still going to get a pre-buy, right? Like, just because it has a fresh annual, I wouldn't say to skip the pre-buy. I would still do a pre-buy.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And a pre-buy scope and an annual scope should be different.
Yes.
They look different. A lot of times for a pre-buy, they'll start out with the biggest ticket items, for the biggest showstoppers at the top.
Yes.
You don't go through it with
a
the
good
same...
shop does.
Yeah. You don't go and approach it with the same procedure as an annual, where you're going to check every box. So let's start at the nose and go to the tail.
Right.
A lot of times in that pre-buy, you're going to start with the biggest, most expensive or known issues. If it's a type of plane that has known problems and you can do certain inspections that will be the showstoppers, you can start with those and be like, if X, Y, and Z is found, we're done here.
I love when shops tell me that they have a schedule that's kind of a tier system. Not all shops do it, but when they do it, I love it. Where they say, okay, chapter 1 of this pre-buy is we're going to do compressions, a borescope, we're going to check the oil filter, and we're going to do these big ticket items.
Yeah.
Then we're going to call the buyer and say, hey, here's our findings. Do you want to go to step 2?
Yep.
And then in this step 2, here's the scope of what we're doing. It's kind of like that medium-sized stuff. And then again, we're going to call the buyer, and then if it's still looking good, then we're going to get to the finer detail items. And I love when they check in with a buyer often and say, hey, before you spend more money on this airplane, why don't we look at this step of the inspection, and then we can keep moving forward. I love when they do that.
And it's saving the buyer money. It's saving the shop time. It's, a lot better of a process. That's really interesting to hear.
Right. And then, so back to safety of the transaction. After the whole pre-buy stuff, there's usually 3 ways that a pre-buy ends. So you say, as a buyer, you say, I love the airplane, let's close on it. You say, I hate the airplane, I want my deposit back, which if it was in the contract, you would, and most contracts are built that way.
Yeah.
You'd still pay for the pre-buy, but you would get your initial deposit back. Or option C is the most used one, which is, hey, I still want to buy the airplane, but we need to renegotiate a couple of items, or these airworthiness items I want you as the seller to take care of, which is standard in the industry, that the seller does any airworthiness items unless it was prior disclosed and agreed upon, or installed equipment that doesn't work. We're typically not renegotiating over like paint scratches or
Spark plugs,
wear and
tires.
tear. Yeah, that kind of normal stuff. That's usually on the buyer. Like, you are buying a used airplane, so you do have to expect it to be used.
Yeah.
So a lot of people sometimes don't get that, especially when they buy a 1 or 2 year old airplane. They think they're getting a new plane, but you are still getting a used airplane. Like, there's still going to be marks and like someone else has flown it. So we're going to get it in the best condition possible with the seller on board. And then if you want to purchase a new paint job, then go for it. But it's usually not on the seller to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know in 2020, the price of planes seemed to really go crazy. What is the industry looking like now when it comes to sales of piston, GA, the exact market that you're in? What are you seeing?
We're hitting our numbers and a little above what we projected at our brokerage. So we're doing okay. There's a lot of inventory out there, and I will say prices are coming down.
Oh, that's good to hear.
Yeah, a little bit. And the market's a little slow right now, which is typical for us to see on election years. So we have our presidential election this year, and usually the months leading up to the election, people are nervous and there's a lot of uncertainty and they're distracted and not wanting to buy expensive machinery.
Yeah.
But no matter what way the election goes, the studies and stats that we have is always, once it's done and everyone knows like how we're all moving forward, doesn't matter what way it goes, the market always comes back.
Yeah, absolutely.
So things are still going good. It's just a little bit slow right now.
And what are the hottest planes right now? Are people still looking at these 50-year-old coming into vintage Cessnas like what we fly, or are people leaning towards the Cirruses and the Diamonds, or is it just all over the board?
I think it's a mixed bag. At our brokerage, we specialize in the late model stuff, so that's mainly what I'm seeing. It's a lot of G5, G6, now G7 Cirruses. It's G1000 182s and 206s, so that's mainly the ballpark that we play in. And those are still extremely popular because as we progress in aviation, people want all the safety stuff. Their families are really invested in that.
Yeah.
They want the Garmin Safe Autoland. They want the parachute. They want the halo system on the M700. So there's so many safety features that come out that people are willing and should be willing to pay for.
Yeah, absolutely. I do hear that you might be buying your husband a Cirrus. That's what he told me when I talked to him the other day.
Oh, funny. I haven't heard that yet.
Thank you so much for sitting here and talking to me. I know I love your Instagram. I follow all of that stuff.
Thank you.
You and Kevin do an incredible job on your YouTube channel, and we all enjoy flying along with you two on all of those trips and adventures. Is there anything that maybe the audience doesn't know about you that you'd want to share, or what's next for the channel?
Yeah, I guess I could share that I will be starting to write for Twin and Turbine magazine.
Oh, wow.
So
that's
you might
exciting.
start to see some columns come out with me and some airplanes that I'll be flying that you normally don't see me in. So that'll be coming out soon.
Oh, well, I can't wait to read out. Looking at your Instagram the other day, and I think just about everyone in aviation got to watch you pass out in the back seat of an F-18. Can you tell me who you were with?
I got a flight with the U.S. Navy Blue Angels. It was the best day of my life.
Oh my God.
It was incredible. I got to go to Pensacola, where they're
Wow.
based. And if you've seen the documentary on the Blue Angels
I
in
haven't yet.
IMAX,
It's on my
or it's on
list.
Amazon Prime, there was a lot of familiar faces and the buildings we were in, so it kind of felt like we were in the movie. And then, yes, got to go on the flight. We flew for almost an hour.
Wow.
In a Super Hornet. I never thought I'd be strapping into the back of an F-18, and got to go out over the Gulf, over the ocean, and we did pretty much every maneuver you see in their air show.
Wow.
Including one where we were just below the speed of sound. I saw over 600 knots on the airspeed indicator in the back seat. We were 500 feet above the ocean and then into a straight vertical climb, and it held about 7.5 Gs. for just a little too long for me. So I took a quick nap and I came back to, and I thought that I was out for so much longer than I was, but it was only a couple seconds when I looked back at the video.
And you came back and you were like, oh, I just took a little nap. You were so funny. Like in that, I would be like, where am I think, but it was
I had that
hilarious.
where am I moment when my head was still down, and I thought that my head was down for such a long time. In fact, it was maybe 2 or 3 seconds.
Wow.
And in fact, we were still in the maneuver. I literally pick my head up because we're still under G's. And I was like, sorry, I've been out. He's like, we're not even done with the maneuver yet. He's like, I would have never known that you passed out. But yes, my viral moment online is me getting G-locked. So
Passing out in the
You
back
never
of an F-18 is not a bad glory moment on social media.
yeah, it was a fun time.
Thanks for tuning into this special edition here in the hangar at Oshkosh, Wisconsin. We want to thank our sponsors, Flying Eyes. You can use code Chels. I know we're on taking off, but use code Chels. Also, Clemens Insurance, and maybe we'll see you on the flight line.